Welcome to this month's edition of Meet the Managers. This month we have Matt Bushby from Rare Infrastructure. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
So Rare Infrastructure has been in our in-house model portfolios for a number of years, and it basically provides a complementary investment to the traditional property managers within our portfolios, provide a more consistent return for investors. So Matt, what investors make up the umbrella of infrastructure?
Infrastructure assets are essential building blocks to any community. If you look at sort of the universe that Rare will invest into, our universe is made up of two broad areas. The first one being the utility assets, so they're the electric, the gas, the water, transmission and distribution networks, essential services, usually very heavily regulated, long-term stable revenues. Everybody, you think about it, everybody needs, to heat their homes, drink water, cooking, the electric for production, etc., very essential in a community. The second group of assets are what we call user pay assets, and they're more volume related, therefore they've got a closer link to, economic activity, and really they're the transport assets. They're the airports, the roads, the seaports, the rail assets, and would also put the wireless communication towers in there as well.
Yeah, so you talked about the consistency of income as far as one of the characteristics of infrastructure. What other characteristics or investment characteristics basically resemble infrastructure? So
infrastructure assets, they are generally monopoly or monopoly-like assets. As a result, they're often heavily regulated. That regulation sets the pricing of these assets to the users, so that pricing is very visible over a long period of time. It means that these businesses have great degree of certainty of revenues over a long period of time. That leads to a high degree of certainty of the dividends that they can pay over time. There's often an explicit inflation linkage in there as well. So these are the type of characteristics that investors are looking for with these sorts of assets.
Yeah, and as well as consistency of income, what other benefits do you see for investors of holding infrastructure in their portfolio?
Infrastructure will give investors a different kind of exposure than other traditional growth assets. You mentioned property before. Infrastructure, because of their nature and being that essential service in a community, they're in use every day. Their revenues don't tend to fluctuate as much as other type of assets. You think industrial companies, even property for that matter, during boom times and recessions, you'll get fluctuations in the rent that landlords can charge. Infrastructure assets generally have very stable revenues through very long periods of time, simply because they are essential to the functioning of society.
Yeah, and what locations around the world and which sectors are you liking at the moment?
At the moment, about 34% of our portfolio is in North America. The majority of that is in the US. We've had an exposure to rail businesses in the US since about 2012, as well as the wireless communications towers since about the same time. We have some gas exposure in the US. We have a very small exposure to US electricity and none to water. Lately, we've been buying some utilities in Europe. They're sort of good defensive names. They'll provide attractive yields, stable regulatory environments, and they'll just be a good sort of anchor to that portfolio over a long period of time. We've recently increased exposures in Japan, and on the flip side, I guess we've reduced exposures here in Australia. The only exposures we're holding here are utility names. We don't hold any of the airports or roads in Australia that we did, say, 3 years ago.
Yeah, and any opportunities you've got on the drawing board at the moment that you're looking to basically increase exposure down the track?
Look, it's been an interesting last year, I guess. There's been a number of IPOs, there's been a number of capital raisings in this space. APA Group, which is an Australian utility, did a $3 billion capital raising late last year to buy the BG pipeline up in Queensland. We're heavily participating in that particular capital raise. There's been an IPO of Spanish Airports Group called AENA earlier this year. In fact, the performance of that particular stock went up so much after the IPO, we've already sold out of it. But there's constantly, change in these assets around the world, and governments are floating portfolios of assets. There are cornerstone shareholders selling down. There's M&A activity, so there'll be constant movement. And our analysts, we've got the largest team of analysts in listed infrastructure, and they're constantly on the lookout for these sorts of opportunities.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Matt, for your time today, and I hope that gives you insight of why we hold infrastructure in the portfolio, and gives you insight what Rare are looking to invest for your portfolio. Next time we'll be looking at investment bonds, so we'll catch up with you then. Thanks.
Thanks very much.